today's focus is going to be on AutoElevate. So AutoElevate is part of the PAM family. It's a privileged access management solution. And specifically, it focuses on, well, today we're going to show you some new stuff, but it focuses on the elevation part of privilege management. So allowing us to ideally get to a point to what we call zero standing privilege. That's our goal, right? The more administrator accounts you have out there, the more people who have privileged access, the larger your threat surface area is. We're going to focus on just-in-time access today, right? How can we do and grant technicians the ability to support our end users and our customers, right? Whichever side of the house you're on. How can we do that in a safe and secure manner? And then we're also going to talk about something completely new. And right now it's got its own code name, and we call it AutoBlocker. So it's a Windows only platform. It's a UAC interrupt tool and allows us to control, the largest area of privilege use, which is I need to do something administratively on a server or on a workstation. So the first thing, let me go ahead. Let me get my screen share out here. Let me get this going so you guys can see all this. All right. So now, there's my mobile phone. There it is. All right, you guys don't need to see us. You know who we are. Let me move this out of the way here. There we go. Put you guys on the other screen there. Perfect. All right. So what we want to address. So as we talked about the elevation part of this, what I want to demo is, and what we're solving for in this is, I want to be able to eliminate the shared admin account process, right? So you basically in Windows today, in security, you have two ways you can achieve doing elevations. Well, I guess technically three. One, you can give everybody admin. That would be very bad. That's not an option. So we got to take that away. So if we take that part away, what does that leave us with? Well, either all of our technicians have admin accounts. The more admin accounts you have, the more potential for breach, the more passwords that are floating around, the more potential for compromise. It's a much bigger threat surface area. So what do? We go to a shared admin account process. Man, the problem with that is we lose our auditing. I don't know who's doing what. I don't know when. I don't know where. I don't know why. I don't know anything. And then we have to deal with, like, a lot of times we got to deal with staff turnover these days. So then, oh, great, he knows all of our admin accounts. He knows all of our passwords, like for all of our admin stuff. Like he could get in and do some real damage, right? I say he could be, she could be anybody, right? So we're going to show you a way to address and how you can take this to be what is very painful and a very aggravating process that takes time. We've got to get together. We got to do Zoom sessions. I have to type out my username. I got to type out my password, or even worse, man, I put it in the clipboard. Right. And so that's a whole nother level of exposure, right? I am exposed to keyloggers. I'm exposed to clipboard snoopers. There's things like that. I don't want to put that stuff out in the wild. There's packet sniffers out there that can pull password hashes. And so none of those things are good. So we don't want to have standing privileged accounts hanging out there, right? Because as soon as you use that, even if somebody were able to grab the hash, that thing's out there. Even if you rotate your passwords every day, man, they got 8 hours they could sit out there and just do all sorts of damage. So let's show you a different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple different scenarios. So I want to start with showing there's rules and policies that you can put into place if there are some key applications you just don't want people to use, right? So give you an example of that policy right now, because the next thing I'm going to show you is going to contradict a little bit. So I'm going to, do what everybody tries to do, try to take off and run this thing. So I have a policy that blocks this, right? So we don't want anybody in the context of people using their computers every day, like running PowerShell, for example, or command line, or any one of those tools or utilities. So we've kind of said, nah, you can't do that. Let's go ahead and put a stop to that. However, as an engineer, right, as the technical team, what we want to be able to give you the ability to do is, whether you're remoting into a machine, or you're on site, or you're an internal IT guy and you've gone to somebody's desk, or somebody waved you down in the hallway and they're like, hey man, can you help me really quick? Without having to dig into a password manager, without having to do anything, as long as I got my cell phone in my hand, I can admin any machine in our environment, right? So let's show you how to do that. So if you haven't used this yet, it's a lifesaver. So what I'm going to do is it brings up a QR code, because I'm already 2FA'd into my app on my phone. But this is another layer of security. So I'm going into my AutoElevate mobile app, right? So I got my AutoElevate app up, a little green screen there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan this QR code. So now it's going to authorize me as the engineer. So I'm allowed because I have an AutoElevate account. Now, it's safe to say I don't have actual admin credentials. This account that I'm logged into is not an administrator account. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go into and try to do the same thing I just did, as a matter of fact. And Brett, I'm going to answer your question in just a second. It's going to show it to you. So let's do PowerShell again, because that's always a fun one. So run as administrator. Now you just saw it get blocked, but because we're in technician mode, it's basically sort of like a bypass. We're going to turn off the other policies and things that we're doing in the other modes. We're going to allow engineers to be engineers and to do their job without any hindrance whatsoever. You make it simple and easy for you. And then basically all I got to do is, if I want to elevate using a generic administrator account, we would call this an over-the-shoulder admin, right? So like you guys logging into somebody's computer or walking up and putting your admin username and admin password. Don't want you to do that anymore. I just want you to click the button. So you're going to see the credentials fly in. Now, the crazy thing that you don't realize that just happened was we just did a just-in-time elevation of an account that's in the machine. We also rotated the password twice and essentially just used an elevation password one time. So it's rotated before we use it, and it's rotated again after we use it, so that even if you were to capture the hashes, it would be useless. This password would be thrown away. This account would be demoted already, and it all happens in about 30 milliseconds. So it's incredibly fast. Now, if I do a who am I? So you can see there I am with that generic account that we use to do our little rotation process. Now, to answer your question, what you want to do is, if you need to change that context, and this is important in support situations. So let's do PowerShell again, but this time we're going to do a user elevation. So we're going to let it check it. Everything looks good. We got our checks right here. That's awesome. Now I do a user elevation. You see some different credentials go flying in there. And now when I do a who am I, now I'm Bill Morgan, just the way I want it. And this is important, the ability to be able to not just do a generic admin elevation. There are occasions and use cases where it is important, especially for support. I know I saw the guys chatting about Revit and stuff in the chat there. It's important to be able to do a user elevation, because tools like Revit are profile based, installed on the profile, and the only person that can basically update it is the person that installed it, which is probably that user. So, or when you have to do things contextually, right? So let's look at the registry really quick. So if I were to use an admin elevation on the registry, for example, well, that would be no good, because now the context of the registry switches to the admin account, and that's not the person that I'm trying to help. So I can change my context. We'll elevate the logged in user. And for anybody that's done any admin work, you know what a pain it is to take somebody who's not an administrator, make them an administrator, go through this process, and then make them not an administrator anymore, and and clean the whole mess up. So all of that whole process just disappears and I can just click the button and it's done, right? So that's using the just-in-time elevation, right? So that gives us the ability to rock up to any machine, anywhere, remote, on-site, doesn't matter. And with just my cell phone and no knowledge of administration, or no knowledge of usernames and passwords or anything like that, and I can help anybody out as long as I got my cell phone. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put mine back into policy mode or live mode there, so that the rules all come back on, everything starts to apply again. And just to kind of show you how quick that is, if I try to do that again, then the machine's going to look at that and go, "Yeah, policies are back on. You cannot do that." So this is a great example of doing just-in-time administration when you're logged in. But there's another use case, right? And for that, I am going to turn this over to our esteemed colleague, Mr. Dave Sibiski, because he's going to talk you through how to do this when the machine's locked or just booted up and I need to get in. But again, I don't want to go back to using credentials. So Dave, I'm going to let you take it away, my man.
All right, cool. Yeah, so obviously, technician mode has been around for a while. It is, somewhat hidden. You can also use the Control Alt A hotkey to get there. And as Bill showed, it's very powerful when you have a session where someone is already logged in. However, you don't always have that, right? There are definitely times where, you're going back and forth with a user. You tell them uh, or you're going to meet them after hours, or you ask them, please keep your computer logged in. I'm going to get in and do some work on your machine. And then you remote in and you're presented with a login screen. And as we all know, you should never know your end users passwords, so that you can never log in as them. And changing their password and having them reset it is a huge pain, right? So we have what we call just-in-time admin login. You see me, I have this VM here. That's what this is here. Which I typically I had login as a standard user, but I also have this admin login button here, which is a credential provider in Windows. I also have my AutoElevate app on my phone, which I'm two-factored in. And very, very similar to what Bill just did, I will click this button to begin admin login. A QR code will appear. I'll go to my app. I scan the QR code. It does a Face ID to make sure I'm me and secure. And then it starts logging in, preparing Windows. Now, in this case, in the settings, and I can show you, well, here, let me accept that. So we'll see the result. I'm logged in as an admin that is named temp admin. That's because I specified that name in the settings, and it's automatically in technician mode for me. And that's it. You have a administrative session here. Now, what's kind of cool about what we're doing here too is that the user, that temp admin user, is actually no longer a part of the administrator group on this machine. We are trying to eliminate standing admin privileges, right? So that same user cannot be logged in with again right now. Now this session has an admin token, and so you can do, administrator things like you normally could with a typical yes and no button. You don't really need to use technician mode there. Oops, got to spell who am I correctly. So there's my temp admin. And this is very important too, because there are some administrative things in Windows that you cannot do as a standard user with just a standard user token and an over-the-shoulder admin account. There are just some things that Windows just does not let you do those things. Most things you can. So sometimes you do need to actually log in with a real admin and actually have an admin session. And so that's what you have here, and that's it. Very simple. Now, the other options that we give you is that you can have it so that when I sign out of this admin, that admin account, or that it's not an admin account. It wasn't in the admin group, but it's also now being destroyed in the background. So it's completely temporary. It's completely gone. And the next time you log in, it'll be recreated. And you can turn that on or off if you want to use the same admin over and over again, because maybe you have some software in the profile that you want to use, tools that you already have access to. You don't want to start with a fresh profile every time. You can do that too. But that's pretty much it. There's really not much to it. It's a very powerful feature, very simple, very easy to use, and that's it.
So yeah, so that follows along the mantra of what we set out to do, right, Dave? Was that we want to create powerful security solutions that solve major challenges that are not terribly difficult to operate and set up. I mean, it's a couple of check boxes. and a QR code. Like you just scan it and you just ride on. You know what I mean? Like I got to admin a machine. It doesn't matter if it's locked. I can get in. If it's not locked and I got to help somebody, I can admin that machine. And you know what? If I win the lottery tomorrow and I'm out, like I don't know any of the local admin accounts because there aren't any. And I don't have any admin passwords because we're not really using any. And you know, we can leave in peace and everything, everybody's kind of happy, right? So that's the just in time
Yeah.
stuff. I want
And
to
I
address
think
a couple
I
things.
think
Oh, go ahead,
everyone
Dave.
else, everyone also, I think probably most everyone in this in that's watching this has either um, tried to figure out some sort of method to saving all these local admin accounts, rotating them. They use laps, they use other softwares, they have custom scripts, they're doing all kinds of stuff, or they've given up on it completely and they've said, forget about it. I'm just going to keep the same passwords and just hope that, you know, the guy that just left my company is not disgruntled and not going to use it against me. None of those are good you know, scenarios, good strategies. And so our mission kind of has been, I've said it a couple of times to different people, is that we're on a, like, we want to destroy admin accounts, right? We don't like them. We don't want them. Now, technically they may be there, right? But we don't want you to have to manage them. We don't want you to have to keep them. We don't want you to have to rotate passwords. We're looking at the solution from a different angle. Instead of building a solution that rotates the passwords for you and stores them somewhere and does all this stuff. We want to eliminate them, right? And we want to just make it so that you don't have to worry about it. That's the whole point, because that's such a headache, right?
Oh, 100%, man. Like dealing with passwords is a nightmare. So just to again kind of reiterate some facts and some security. These are from like the Verizon reports, the Sophos reports. Like you can pretty much pick any major vendor that puts out a security report. 9 out of 10 breaches are successful because the person had privilege use. 8 out of 10 of those are compromised passwords. So if you can get rid of accounts, admin accounts, and you can get rid of the need for the password for an admin account that doesn't exist anymore, you just solved 90% of your problems, right? And that's huge, man. That's like, it's a major hole. It's like, you know, a crater in the ground that just got reduced to something the size of a, you know, like a golf ball hole, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. I want to answer a couple of these questions really quick. So for Felix and Dave, somebody asked about, hey, when, you know, is there ever going to be a way to do this with domain accounts too? So right now we're just talking about local admin, which by the way can do like 98% of everything in the world, but we know there's some need there for some domain stuff as well when we got to do domain level stuff. Dave, any
Yeah, you
thoughts
know,
on that?
we're not against looking into that for sure. I mean, ultimately, we got this feature out as kind of a V1, kind of a bare bones. We knew that the bare features that we had would be secure and good, and the idea is now to iterate on it with more use cases that you guys need. So there's one of them. That's definitely going to be something that we're going to look into for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
solve all those use cases for sure.
exactly. Like own it, own admin access safely and securely, right? Um, so yeah, and a couple things too, like all of the actions that are being done, which is why it makes this so much better, is everybody's actions are being logged. So we know who's doing what. Like when Dave just did that login there, that was recorded for that system. We know it was Dave that did it. And we can go back and report on that. And then the same with all of my actions, like those are all recorded there. We know who did it. We know when you did it. We know what you did it for. Um, we know what process you elevated. Like we got everything is completely audited for compliance, right? Um, all right. And then there's a question there on can you create one? Yes, you kind of, Mike, you kind of answered your question. You can absolutely do that in the you know rare instance that you know you couldn't use this. All right, so let's get on to blocker. All right, so this is interesting. So there's another problem that we got to talk about, which is something that is becoming a lot more prevalent in what we're seeing out there, and that is what we call, you know, like malware-free or living off the land attacks, where it's fileless malware basically, and it's trying to use a lot of Windows tools and utilities that already exist, hence the living off the land part, right? Um, but that already uses some stuff that's already there in Windows. And there's a lot of things that have been identified through a host of different areas that potentially are recommended that you should probably try to block or control these particular applications. But what I want to do is Felix is a guru on this, and so Felix, if you take the folks through the concept and idea behind AutoBlocker and sort of like how you guys put this together. It's like a general idea of what it does, what the theory was.
Yeah, absolutely. As you've seen, most of the AutoBlocker, or rather AutoElevate product, we've seen how it's focused on privileged access management. Now we're going a little bit away from that in the sense that we truly believe in a layered approach to security. So we believe that first and foremost, we want to have that privileged access layer enabled. But then the reality is that, as you mentioned, what's being called now malware-free attacks or living off the land attacks are on the rise. As a matter of fact, if I may share my screen,
Absolutely, man.
Let me do this real quick. There you go. So you see on the screen, right?
We got you.
Okay, awesome. So we see here, we have a slide from the 2023 Global Threat Report from CrowdStrike. And as the headline reads, adversaries continue to move beyond malware to gain initial access and persistence. And we see that it's been steadily climbing until now, as of 2022. I'm sure it'll be higher for 2023. 71% of all attacks had malware-free activity on it. So what is malware-free? It is basically a payload, a program that doesn't come with your traditional malware tools like rootkits, encryption tools, and the like. It literally, the payload, once it runs in your system, it looks to see what can I use in the environment, in the land, in order to achieve my objective. That's basically what it is. And as we see, they are on the rise. So with what we've codenamed AutoBlocker, that new feature, we're hoping to address this attack vector. Again, we still have the privileged access management, but in reality, an adversary doesn't always need elevated privileges to cause damage. So that's the attack vector that we're addressing here. So if you want, we could go right into a demo to see what this is all about.
I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah, maybe Felix, as you get the demo set up, I just want to kind of give a little, little history briefly. Many of you have been with AutoElevate for a long time, and you probably remember that before we were acquired, before CyberFOX existed, we were talking about working on something that was going to be whitelisting, or that was going to be utilizing WDAC, Windows Defender Application Control. And essentially, AutoBlocker has kind of come from that, right? So what we kind of found is that, because again, as I mentioned earlier, and as Bill mentioned, what we've always been striving to do is solve a problem, but not only just solve a problem to sell it or whatever, but to help everyone to be as secure as possible, but to do it with the least amount of disruption to your end users, and also to you and your technicians, and also to make it not as difficult as potentially it could be. And ultimately, we found that allow listing, WDAC, all those things, we just couldn't find that right balance, right? And so we started to look, well, what would we have to do in order to get that balance, to give us enough security, but also to make it not so difficult, and also to make me not disrupt users, right? And ultimately, what we started doing was narrowing our approach. Instead of the idea of allow listing, which is right, block every single thing, and then you have to make rules for all the good things that you use and every single update that it has, which is a monumental task. We started saying, how can we narrow our focus and kind of use that same concept, but to really do it for just the really bad things, right? The things that could really make problems on your system, or the things that, as we learned over time, that Microsoft had a list essentially kind of that are considered what these are, living off the land binaries, that they said, you need to block these things because if people can use these things against you, right? These are programs that are included in Windows that are being used against you, right? And so we said, well, what if we just focus on that? What if we really put our focus on those specific things? That will really help to make people secure, but it also makes it potentially manageable. And that's really kind of where AutoBlocker started to evolve and started. So we've been working on this for some time, and we've kind of scrapped some things because they were never good enough. They were never able to be easy enough, and they would never be able to cause the least amount of disruption to your users until we think we have something here now that we're going to show you, and obviously continue to improve. But ultimately, that's what it comes from. That's still striving to get the best security thing in a way that's simple and causing the least amount of disruption.
Excellent. Yeah. Now, in order to understand what those different applications are, we have a list. They've made reference to it from Microsoft, and we're curating this from different sources, and we're going to speak of two sources right now. The first one is Microsoft themselves. If you notice this article that I have here on the screen, applications that can bypass WDAC and how to block them. Now, I just want to focus on this sentence right here. Unless your use scenarios explicitly require them, Microsoft recommends that you block the following applications. And it gives us a list of some 40 different applications that Microsoft themselves are telling you, hey, unless you really need them, you should really block them. So that is one source of the list that we're getting. Now, the other source is this project called Living Off the Land Binary Scripts, and now also libraries. In other words, the LOBAS project. Now, notice the goal. Their goal is to document every binary script and library that can be used for living off the land techniques. Again, that is the focus. This is not to have to block Spotify and things like that. These are truly pieces of software, components, typically of the Windows operating system, that are being exploited every day in order to gain access to your system without having to deploy malware itself. Malware-free attacks is what we're talking about.
So Felix, really quick,
yes.
I want to point out too that blocking an application is actually not that difficult, and you probably already have 2 or 3 tools in your arsenal that can just do that. If it's just things you just don't want to run, I had to redo a Sophos policy yesterday because it was blocking PowerShell. So like there are other tools and utilities that you already have that easily block. Your RMM can do it, right? Most ADMs or EDRs can do it, right? So like if I don't want something specifically to run, it's pretty easy to make that happen. In one way or another, Microsoft has a host of utilities to allow you to do that. What we're really focused on here is this is what threat actors are using to do really, really bad stuff. And instead of trying to not calling anybody out, but instead of trying to create rules and policies that control every application in the world, right? And this is kind of answering some of those questions in the Q&A there. I'm not trying to control every application in the world, right? It is too much. There's too many, and it's too much admin. It's a lot of manual. And what do we really get in benefit out of that, right? What we're trying to do is say, look, what I don't want to happen, the outcome I'm looking for is I don't want any of those apps to get compromised and use any of these utilities to do some bad things, because that's what they do. So that's what this is focused on. So Felix, man, let's take a look at what you guys wrote. Now, by the way, guys, this is early. You know, some of this is all development right now. So you guys are getting a serious under the cover sneak peek at what's happening, right? So Felix, man, take it away.
Okay, great. So if you're a current customer, you may this screen is familiar to you. This is our admin portal. But you may have noticed that some of the menus have changed. Since now we're adding blocking features to the AutoElevate product, we have grouped the elevation features together and then the blocking features here together. Today, we're just going to hone in on the blocking features. So the first thing to note is that we now have here an AutoBlocker mode. Again, AutoBlocker is just the code name. It may change or it might stick, who knows? But right now I have it in audit mode. On my left here, I have a virtual machine, brand new install. You know, it's as safe as it could be after a brand new install. And I have the agent already installed. And as noted, I have it in audit mode. So what does that mean? Well, we're going to launch here in the virtual machine CMD, the command prompt, and it opened as normal. You know, nothing remarkable about that. If we note here, we have no rules and no events. So basically, it is enabled, but since we have no rules, it is not reporting anything back to us. So why don't we address that? I'm going to show you how to do things manually because you have full control of the system. So I'll show you how to do things manually, and then I'm going to show you a better approach afterwards. So let's see how to do it manually. Let's come in here and we'll go and add a rule. And right now, this is the list of the things that different sources are telling us we need to worry about. So let's look for CMD. Okay. And we'll select it. And we're going to add a rule based on that. We'll select the level. For those new to the product, you can assign a specific rule, whether it be for the elevation part of the product or the blocking at different levels. It could be for all the companies that you manage. It could be one company, location, or a specific computer. In this case, in my virtual environment, I'm just going to select all companies. And it should have created a rule. If we come here and refresh, we see that we now have a block rule for CMD for all companies. Now, that rule has already propagated to our virtual machine here. In a live environment, it may take a few minutes for any changes to propagate. But in our case, being that this virtual environment is happening a lot quicker. So if we launch CMD again, we'll try to run it. It opened up as normal. But we have a rule in place. But keep in mind that it is in audit mode. So while in audit mode, what is it doing? It is logging the activity based on the rules. So if we go back to the events and refresh the screen, let me make sure that I had it in audit mode. CMD.
Dev environment, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Live environment. Let me come in here. Switch it real quick, make sure. No, that in companies. Let me go to computers. It's in audit. Let me switch it to live mode. Okay, I think that took place. So let's come in here and let's once again, let's run CMD. And there it is. In this case, it blocked it. So what do we see here? It blocked it because I set it to live mode. Now, if we go back to the events, now we have the event. So now we have here an event telling us that it blocked it. Why did it block it? Because there's a rule for it, and we have set it to live mode. While not in live mode, it allowed it just as one would expect. So, you know, as Bill mentioned, blocking stuff is easy. What gets challenging and what was even tricky to even do with WDAC is, well, what if I have an application like my RMM that legitimately uses, you know, CMD, PowerShell, Who Am I, all of these different tools? What do I do at that point? Well, I have here this little demo RMM, which is going to pretend to be whatever RMM you're using, whether it's synchro data or whatever the case may be. So being that I have that block rule, if I try to launch it, oh, access denied, exactly as expected. So we're going here, we'll go to the events, and we'll see now that there is in fact another event, and this time it blocked it, but notice that it has a parent. It tells us what launched it. In this case, what tried to execute it was my demo RMM. So what can I do so that if it is my RMM using it, it works? But if it's being launched by a user, malware, or something else, it doesn't. Let's create a rule based on this event. And now here, I have a lot of different options. First of all, under identification criteria, we see that the process that we're targeting is CMD. Okay, and I could use the hashes if I want. Now, let's hone in on the parent. So for the parent process, I'm going to tell it that if it's my demo RMM, and I will use the hashes. So I'm basically telling it, if you ever see CMD being used by demo RMM, then what I want to do, I want to allow it. Let's make it at the company level as well. So we'll save that. We'll wait a few moments for it to propagate. In the meantime, we can go back to the rules and refresh. And now we have two rules. We have the original CMD exe being blocked, but we also have CMD with a parent of demo RMM as allow. So if we go back to our virtual environment and we'll try to launch CMD from the run command, still being blocked, just as expected. If I launch it from here, it lets me do it. Okay, so this is how you would manage the AutoBlocker system, the AutoBlocker rules, if you were to do it manually. But you know, we try to dog food our own product, so we're out there using this, and we realize, you know what, we could do it better, because in reality, we're talking about over 200 potential applications that can be exploited, that are known to have been exploited, even the latest versions. And so how can we address this and make it easier? Because again, the alternative in doing it manually is that you go set things into audit mode, create rules for everything in audit mode, and then sift through the events. Well, that's where blocking recommendations come in. When you enable AutoBlocker in your systems, it's going to start analyzing the activity, what processes are being used, and then determine, hey, what is not being used, because that is the important part for blocking purposes. Because if we block what is not typically used in your day-to-day activities, then we're going to stop a lot of attack vectors. We've deployed this internally for a couple of days. Actually, if we see here, 10 days of data we currently have in this demo system. And so it is going to start making recommendations based on what it found. So let's highlight the first one. It's telling us that Microsoft recommends blocking a number of applications when your use case do not explicitly require them. That's what we saw on this article. No computer has used 35 of those applications after monitoring for an average of 10 days. So at this point, as an administrator, I have to ask myself, okay, it's 10 days of activity. And by the way, 10 days is actually being tabulated by the hour. So if you only have a computer that's only turned on 8 hours a day, it will be 3 working days for it to register as 1 full day. So it's operational hours. So in 10 days, none of these have been used. If I'm comfortable with that, then I could apply the rules, or I could let it run longer and let the system continue to make recommendations. And when I'm comfortable, it's been long enough, then I could block them. Here we could see a list of the 35 that is recommending. And in this case, let's do it ourselves. Let's have it do it for us rather. So it's busy creating those 35 rules for you. And if we go here to the rules and refresh, there we have it. So again,
Man, that is awesome.
now it is blocking all those that weren't even used, so that there's no disruption. And if in fact one of those things do prop up, it may be malware in your system. So as an example, we're gonna come in here, go back to the recommendations, and let's also apply the LOLBAS. Let's add them. In this case, 147. It determined that it could create safely 147 rules for you. So we're going to go ahead and create those.
And just a quick time check. So we're like 4 minutes over. So we appreciate you guys sticking with us and hanging out for an extra couple minutes to see the last few minutes of this. So we appreciate that. So we know we're over a little bit of time, but thank you so much. We'll wrap this up here in just a second.
Absolutely. So now all that has propagated to our system. We still have our original rules in place, and that's working. But as a little bonus, let me add this to it. I have a little HTA app here. Now, I just put this together, haven't run it yet. Let's see if it works. Remember, we don't even know what an HTA app is. Most people don't, but it is one that's hardly ever used in your actual environment, but gets exploited all the time. Now, that was in one of those rules that I didn't even have to look out for and learn what it was. But if I go to run it now, it's blocking it for me. See, I didn't have to do anything in that regard. Now, if I go to my block rules, and let's say that I did HTA, that I did decide to remove that rule for some reason. I remove it. First of all, it'll immediately pop up again in the recommendations if it hasn't been used, but in this case it has been. So never mind that it has been used. But now when we run it, there it is, game over. You have been hacked. So here, and again, an HTA app is not something that is on the forefront of our minds, but it's something that we didn't have to care about because this system saw that it wasn't being used, saw that it was a threat, and recommended for you to block it.
Yeah.
Outstanding,
so
man.
Instead of you having to worry about, you know, because you could do it you could do another approach, right? You could block everything and then start looking at logs and start trying to figure out, spend hours and hours by trying to figure out what are all the things that are going to disrupt my users, and maybe you could flip it to live mode, and then your users will start complaining because they're having this blocked or that blocked or who knows what, right? Or you could just turn it on. The recommendation system will then start to recommend for you when and what things you can block. And then additionally, what we weren't able to show you here, it'll then start, it's able to know then what are the things that are running and how you can then make allow rules. It will then suggest for you allow rules that if it sees one computer in a company that is you, or maybe let's say a group of computers, like for example, developers. Let's say there's a department in one of your companies that is a bunch of developers and they all use MS Build, Visual Studio, Command Prompt, PowerShell. They all use these things. Well, it will be able to recommend for you that you can make allow rules for those computers or for that location, but then you can make global block rules for either that company or for higher levels. And there will be no disruption, but everyone will be able to get the right amount of blocking that is necessary without you having to process it all and to pour through the logs and figure out what is MS Build, what is sc.exe and all these things. You're not going to have to worry about that because we have the focus of being able to, we're looking specifically at these living off the land binaries. And that helps us to be able to make these recommendations now with the data that we're able to collect from your entire environment. So it's awesome, guys. It's really, really cool. And it should just continue to improve. That recommendation engine will just continue to help to flesh out all those rules in a way that you won't have to manually do it. So we're just super excited about it.